Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of American Grit with myself, Tim Jensen. It's good to have you back as we continue to have conversations here at American Grit about psychedelics and mental health within the United States. We talk a lot about how mental health is affecting first responders and veterans, but we don't really talk about how it's affecting the greater population of America. Right, and I think this is a conversation that we're going to bring out today. We have a fantastic guest that's going to share what is going on in central parts of the United States, most specifically Lawrence, Kansas, of all places. Have you ever heard of it? I did, because I used to live in that state. But welcome to the show, our friend Ian Cook, founder of the Lawrence Psychedelic Society, and is doing some great work bringing ketamine information to the people of Kansas and the Midwest, as well as talking about the benefits of how psychedelics are having great effects on treatment-resistant disorders and bigger psychiatric circumstances are happening within the community. Specifically, we're going to be talking about schizophrenia, bipolar. Some of the things that really have got you into the space, right? And the work that you're currently doing today because of those motivations. And I'm super excited to talk about it, Ian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, what is the Lawrence Psychedelic Society, and how did it start?
Yes. The Lawrence Psychedelic Society. I started that group last year, just about a year now. I was looking for a community in Kansas, and I wasn't quite finding the community and the folks that I was looking for. So I kind of had to form that community. And so I started the group last year. We were just doing very basic once a month in-person meetings. We had a solid group of regulars that were coming. More people wanted to get involved, see how they can help support the community and build the community in Lawrence, Kansas. And so through that, we've started integration circles, building more of a peer support network. We're doing social events now. So the last year was really just form the community, just kind of seeing what the community needed and wanted in the space. And so I'm very, very happy that we have some dedicated members. We have veterans, we have EMS workers, we have folks on the clinical side, the counseling side. So I think we're taking little bits and pieces of the general community and finding out how people can help in that regard. So I'm very excited for the next few months as we continue to advocate for veterans, first responders. Our current initiatives are just building that network of support, connecting with our local mental health resources. In Lawrence, we have Burt Nash, Heartland Community Health Center. Just down the road in Topeka, there's Vallejo. So however we can be almost that middleman of mental health between the folks consuming medicine and the folks that can help provide support, such as the mental health orgs. So our current initiatives now, we're looking into providing veterans and first responders with hopefully ketamine-assisted therapy. So in Kansas, it's kind of an interesting legal gray area where legislation moves very slowly. And so we are not having to wait on politicians. We can help provide that support for our veterans and our EMS workers and first responders and policemen to help provide legally accessible medicines like ketamine. We don't have to try to change legislation. We can kind of help provide that network of support, build that network of peer support and community now as the future changes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, one of the things that, we talk about a lot on the show is, the amount of information that's coming out about psychedelics into, the United States, right? And the way that we're consuming this content, this media that's being built around these things, right? And purely an educational platform right now is what you're seeing, across, where you consume your media. What was like in Lawrence, Kansas, right, where you're getting a hodgepodge of different people, right, from military to first responders to the average American that just has an average job, right? They're coming to you. How are they finding you, and what is their motivations? What are they seeking from you, right? You're talking about you're building these programs, but what are they wanting specifically from you? Because this is a new space. Like we haven't seen this sense of engagement since the '60s when it was shut down, right? So is it the old heads that are coming out saying, "Oh man, we have this opportunity again," or is it a younger generation of people saying, "Hey, we're just looking for new ways of accessing mental health"?
True. Yeah. So actually, it has been a mix. We've had, as you say, the old heads come out of the woodworks once they hear that we're active and doing things. It seems like we have a lot of young folks too. So I'm 33. A lot of my peers in the group are around the 30s, late 20s, kind of moving into that space of autonomy and moving into another stage of life almost of where they've done the work for themselves. They've gone to therapy. They're building that mental health foundation, and then psychedelics are kind of coming in to help kind of get up that last 10%. So all the work that takes place kind of gets them 90% up the mountain, building that foundation of mental health. And then once they have that foundation, the psychedelics can kind of take them that 10% up to the top of the mountain. And so we're finding folks that are just entering the space too. So education and awareness, those are big parts of why I'm in the space, just because of family members who have been negatively affected by psychedelics, trying to help prevent bad situations from happening. And folks will have bad trips. They'll have difficult trips, as folks like to say, instead of bad trips. But how can we best support them on their journeys, provide them with the tools, the ABCs, the 101 of psychedelics, so that they can get started on their own healing journey. So a big part of our work is introducing folks to the space. What are psychedelics? How can they be used intentionally? What does it look like to prepare for an experience? And then what does it look like to integrate an experience after it happens? So we're kind of helping folks get through the entire gamut of it. It's not just you have an experience and then you're done kind of thing. It's very much a process, and it's an ongoing process.
Right. Yeah. And that's, we get into some of the conversations of, those that think this should be legal for recreational, and then those that think that this is, medical, right? And there's conversations for both, right? But the integration is a huge aspect of it. So when you're coming up with this idea of founding this initiative, this society, right? You have some background in this medicine itself, right? You've used it for your own healings, but there was something that brought you to that before before that, right? Before the use of the medicine, and it really is the origin story, right, of Ian Cook, in many respects, and I say that in the most respectful way possible, right? Because it's a horrible story of abuse in so many different ways. I would love for you to share with our audience exactly what that was, because, ladies and gentlemen, this stuff is real. Like, there are bad actors out there that are abusing this medicine. They're abusing people. They're abusing the process and the spirituality of it all.
Yes, true. So I'll give a bit of my background and family history of the narrative of how I was raised and grown up, and the context that my life is kind of in, and how that informs my choices and my decisions. So I really entered the psychedelic space in earnest about 3 years ago. So about 3 years ago, my sister, Fiona Emily Cook, she had her most recent schizophrenic bipolar episode. And ever since then, she's kind of been lost to us. So we're not in contact with her. We haven't seen her in about 3 years. Hopefully she has what she needs, and hopefully she's doing all right. But she had her episode. And then a couple months later, I had my own bipolar episode. So it was my first and only, knock on wood, episode so far. And I had my episode as a result of her episode. And so about 10 years ago, my sister had just gotten out of college. She's 4 years older than me, so we were super close growing up. She was very, very important in forming my creative sense of poetry and music and art. So she was a big influence in me. So I love her dearly. And so she had 10 years ago, she was abused by a partner. Someone that she trusted, someone that she thought she could be supported by, and they abused her with psychedelics. So LSD was a part of that abuse. She was dosed without her consent. She wasn't given support. She wasn't given structure.
And when you mean dose without consent, like, this is over a long period of time, right? This is not just like you drop a couple, tinsels in your drink here and there periodically.
Yes. So from our understanding and what she's told us, she was essentially gone for about a year. We didn't hear from her for about a year, and we thought she was just living her life. We thought she was just doing her thing, and it turns out that. Yes, to be dosed without your consent. LSD can be administered in a liquid form. So her partner just dosed her like that. It can be absorbed through the skin. It's it is a nefarious way to use such a drug. And so as we understand it now, she was given too many psychedelics, too close together with not enough time to regulate, not enough time to get to a baseline. And so she just started cycling. And once that cycle starts, it's very difficult to get it under control unless you have certain types of medications to kind of stop that cycling process. And so we're not quite sure of the extent of the abuse and what else took a part of it, but we know that she wasn't given support and structure. She wasn't given the mental health support, the emotional support, things that people need to integrate their experiences. So essentially, she was just having experience after experience after experience. And so the body doesn't know how to regulate that. It doesn't know how to get back to the baseline because there's no relief from it. It's kind of like just too much all at once. And so that manifested schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So she had auditory visual hallucinations, delusions of grandeur from her bipolar. And so it really was about 10 years of us trying to figure out the right med combination for her, the right support system from her. As a result, she was some of the medications would just put her down for days, so she wouldn't be able to sleep, or she would just sleep too much and wasn't really a functioning person as it was. And so the last few years was really her trying to figure out the right combination of support. And so we thought she had found that support. She was living with my dad out in Topeka, Kansas, at our grandparents' place. She was getting an MBA from Washburn. She was working a part-time job. So she had found the right kind of circumstances for her to be functioning as someone that lives with schizophrenia and bipolar. And so she was working on it, and she tried so hard to get to this place of almost normalcy or functioning. But at some point, she thought that the medications that she was taking were having negative physical side effects. So she started walking with a limp. She had some tics, nervous tics that she couldn't quite control, some nerve pains and just pains throughout her body. So she decided to stop taking her medications. And we tried our best to support her. We understood what happened, what happens when she's off her medications. We had dealt with a number of episodes in the past. So her being an autonomous adult, we tried to support her as best as possible. But unfortunately, she had a complete schizophrenic bipolar episode again. So in her paranoia, she thought me, my dad, and my mom had dosed her again with LSD. And so a total flip of the coin of we had a close relationship. We'd given her love and support, and due to her mental health conditions, it completely flipped the script. And so she barricaded the house. She thought we were out to get her. She was calling police and all sorts of things in her paranoid state. And she eventually fled the state of Kansas. So she ended up going out east for a number of months. She had gone to college in upstate New York, so she knew some folks up there. Heard from her for a bit, a lot of it paranoid delusions. And then she disappeared for another few months, ended up back on the West Coast. So in her episodic state, she was kind of still operating and moving. So she's very, very, very smart. And so she knows how to function. She knows how to get around things. And so that was about 3 years ago. And so during her episode, I had my own episode because I didn't quite know how to help her. I went into crisis myself, and through that, I started reaching out and trying to create a network of support for both myself and for my sister. So I was working on LinkedIn at the time. At the job, I was working in sales and marketing. So I kind of had this portal into a more professional realm. And so I was just looking for psychedelics and information of the clinical side of things, the counseling side of things. And I found the right groups. So one of the first groups I was connected with is Heroic Hearts Project. They do a lot for the veterans in the psychedelic space. Through that, I found other peer support networks, other communities, and kind of just from the ground up of learning what the space was in its current iteration and kind of what folks were doing with the work. So really that first year, I was mostly online, connecting with folks across the country. I found a few peer support networks, and from that, I kind of hopped around the country, going to a couple conferences, going to a few group sessions of folks working in the space. And so I'm very grateful for those first few connections through Heroic Hearts and those other groups. And then I started sort of from a wide network of online, national. That was the first year. In the second year, I kind of was looking a little more locally. So I was looking for networks and communities in Kansas, but I wasn't quite finding them. But through some connections, I found some folks out in Kansas City, which is just about 40 minutes east from Lawrence, right along the Missouri-Kansas border. And through that, I met some folks out in Missouri. So Ethan Thampy, who is a lobbyist that's involved in the Missouri side of things, I met him through there was a Kansas City Psychedelic Society that had kind of started again meeting after that first pandemic quarantine was kind of lifted. So people were getting more out and about. The society had a few meetings that was kind of promising, and it was exciting for me to have a local network for the first time. So I met Epen, got connected with him. I ended up going out to Jefferson City, to their capital, with a few veterans, Daniel Harkins, and a couple other folks that are involved with the Kansas City scene. I just wanted to see what the process was. So we walked around the Capitol. They had a few meetings with representatives and senators, and just to see how the conversation is brought from the veterans' point of view and the civilian patriot point of view. And just seeing how the process is. So it was very informative. It gave me a lot of ideas of how to kind of maybe start approaching this on the Kansas side. Since Missouri, we're very close. We are the Midwest. Trying to reach conservative folks in the Midwest, I think there's a way to reach them, and that's through providing support for veterans. Do you support veterans' mental health care? Do you support first responders' mental health care? Very easy questions to ask, and then we can say, oh, we have these solutions that are here. So that was the second year, kind of networking more in Missouri, in the Kansas City area. And then last year, I kind of went just even more locally. So in the town I lived in Lawrence, Kansas. I wasn't finding that same sort of network and that same kind of community that I was finding more out east. And so that's what motivated me to really start the Lawrence Psychedelic Society. How can I provide an opportunity and hold space for folks that are looking for something? So I just did very basic guerrilla networking and marketing. I was putting up flyers around town. I was putting up stickers. I was making just small Facebook groups, getting people in the door. And I was surprised that first meeting, I think we had about 20 people. I was expecting a few. I wasn't expecting 20 people. But I think that just goes to show that people were looking for something. Yeah. And once they find this thing, they're just set on the path. So I didn't know what to do with the group. Initially, I was just kind of seeing what people wanted, what people needed. And from there, I just took what they wanted and what they were looking for and just kind of helped provide that for them. So really, providing the opportunity for folks to come, to learn about psychedelics, to learn about how they can use psychedelics intentionally, how they can prepare, how they can integrate their experiences. And so it was a few months of just community building, sharing my work in the space, kind of sharing the larger national scene and how things were moving. And then eventually folks started asking about integration circles. So for folks that don't know, an integration circle is typically a peer support circle, anywhere from 5 to 10 folks just coming, sharing their experiences, being in a place of no judgment, allowing them to share their experiences and relate to one another. So in each circles, we just go one by one. People share their experiences. Sometimes folks would like feedback, sometimes a little advice just based on other people's experiences. But otherwise, it's just a place to share and vocalize their experiences. And not a lot of folks have opportunity to do that. A lot of folks are doing this work on their own. And so that's what motivates me to create community in Kansas, because a lot of folks are still doing this stuff on their own. How can we best meet them where they are? How can we best support them to find community where they can share their experiences, find like-minded folks that are also working on themselves in this very intentional way? So yes, you'd mentioned earlier, recreational versus, I guess, more the clinical approach. Certainly, there's room for both. Recreational, I've had a lot of wonderful, very powerful healing recreational journeys. But I think in that clinical side of things, where it's a little more structured, a little more with ritual and ceremony in mind, I think there's a nice middle ground between more of the clinical side of things and the holistic side of things. I think there's room for both in the middle, and that's kind of where the real healing can kind of happen, because people are taking things that matter to them, things that they care about, injecting it into their experiences and kind of creating their own specific, unique situation for themselves, because everybody's unique. Everyone has their own traumas. Everyone's working through their own things, but how can we support them on their individual journeys?
Yeah.
Right.
That's fantastic. There's a lot to unpack there. But I think the best place to start is, Missouri is making a lot of, advances, as you scratched a little bit on that. We got pieces of legislation. We put ibogaine up in the state for $10 million funding. So a lot of positive things are happening in the state of Missouri when it comes to the mental health. And not only the mental health conversation, but the idea of of finding new modalities and expanding the alternatives, right? Where do you see it in the state of Kansas? Are they as far down the path as the state of Missouri and others?
No. So I think Kansas might be one of those last states to kind of move things through in legislation. So Kansas was I think is the last state to move through prohibition. So they're a little behind the times, admittedly, which is okay. We don't have to kind of wait for politicians to make change. We don't have to wait for the slow moving gears of our government to help provide support for folks now. So yes, we are kind of looking to Missouri of what they've done. First, they moved through medical cannabis in the plant medicine space, recreational cannabis, and now I think now that they've moved through that kind of introductory plant-based medicine with cannabis, now they can kind of introduce psilocybin as another plant medicine. And so I thought we could maybe kind of replicate that in Kansas. Kansas is a little slower moving, so we've introduced a couple bills for medical cannabis, and those have been shot down pretty swiftly due to politicians claiming to protect the Kansas citizens. And so they're a little slower moving. So I through conversations with reps and senators and just community members too, we found that that's not where we need to focus and put our energies. We can create a network of support by connecting with our mental health organizations. We can find legal remedies like ketamine in our state. We don't have to try to change things to help provide support. We can provide that ongoing support right now with legal solutions in Kansas. So all we have to do is provide the network. We have to provide the preparation, integration, all the things that folks need to know to get started on their journey.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's critical. We talk about it a lot in our programming when it comes to psychedelics. Is the integration, pre-work, during, and post-work that comes along with it. Right, the medicine is just the vehicle that puts you into space. The integration is where all of the work is actually happening. Right, we're identifying behaviors that we don't want to continue. Yada yada yada. Now, with that part of the integration that you guys are focused on, walk us through, what a protocol, in your opinion, that you guys are working towards.
Yes. So no, in that I can share my own experiences. So once I had gotten that first bipolar episode kind of under control, I had moved through the stages of mania. I had dipped down into more of a depressive low. So I try to relate to folks that bipolar is not quite high and low. It's more of like a speed thing. So when you're manic, things are very fast. Thoughts are coming really quickly. You're making connections really quickly, or maybe connections shouldn't be made. And there's a kind of an aggravated irritability of not getting things at the speed that you want them. And that's the manic side of things. And
a mixture of paranoia and anxiety.
Yes. Oh gosh. Yeah. And so that's kind of where it can really spiral out of control. But once I had gotten that under control with medications and support from my wife, Maddie, and family members, I had kind of baselined. And then once I hit the baseline, I kind of dipped down to that depressive, slow low. And that's where I was talking to psychiatrists about the potential of ketamine, because I knew that was a legal solution in my state. I wanted to go through the system as someone just entering this. How can I do this the best way for myself? And so I relied on my peer support networks. I was talking to the folks that I'd met over the past couple of years, trying to figure out the best way that I can kind of do things on my own. So with the ketamine clinic that I went to, they were just administration. So they didn't help with the preparation. They didn't have integration support just because they didn't have on-staff psychiatrists and therapists. So I was relying on my peer support network of what looked like the best opportunity for myself to go through this. So when I was preparing, I was creating my own music playlists. I was very intentional with my music choice, which I think had a very big impact on my experience. I was choosing music from high school and college and like really exuberant, happy times. Because my mid and late 20s was kind of a down, dark period for me of me and my partner. We were going through alcoholism and dealing with substance abuse. And with the substance abuse, there was that muting of creativity, that muting of wanting to do things and be active in the world. And so it was about 5 years ago. We're about 5 years sober now. We had started going to basic therapy, basic medications, really building that foundation of support. So by the time that my mental health crisis and my sister's mental health crisis happened, I already had a couple years of sobriety, a couple years of really intentional therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy was really helpful for me. and journaling. So I have this journal here of this is my integration, this is my preparation. I write down my feelings, my thoughts, my intentions. What am I trying to work on? And so this is a dialogue with myself of my interior, making it exterior, putting it down on paper. And then I have a physical representation of where I was and who I was at that time. And then I can be a lot more objective about what I'm working on. Kind of taking myself out of that, the ego and the self, and kind of looking at it from an objective third person's point.
Do you store all these journals when you're completing with them?
Yes, yes. So since I've been in this space, I keep all my journals because at some point I'm going to synthesize all these, put them all together to create a narrative that folks can identify with and go through. Of here's a young man in just entering his 30s, dealing with mental health crisis and dealing with schizophrenia and bipolar in his family. This is essentially the clinical trial that I conducted on myself. I wanted to see what I could do with the proper support, the proper structure, the proper systems to engage with these medicines. And so I was very, very careful and very, very measured in how I approached these things because I saw what happened with my sister with no support, no structure. Me and my sister, I think of us as two sides of the same coin. And so I'm trying to do everything to provide myself and those around me with the support and structure that she didn't have. And that's been the main motivator in how I approach the space with education and awareness of how can I prevent my sister's situation from happening to others. And so with my preparation for those ketamine sessions, I had a few weeks of just really intentionally being of what am I working on? What am I hoping to address? And I was hoping to address my bipolar disorder. I was hoping to get a lifelong depression under control and anxiety. So I've had depression and anxiety since high school. Just from a number of different things of genetics from my parents, home situations of living in a house that was verbally abusive and loud and bad communication. So communication was a big part of how I guide myself and what I believe in is how can I effectively communicate with folks. And so kind of dialoguing with myself through my journal and through talking with peer support networks, I entered that experience of the ketamine therapy fully prepared, in my opinion. I knew what I was going for. I knew how to best support myself with my music and my creative endeavors. And so when I went to the clinic, I did 6 IV infusions. That was 1 day a week. My wife would drive me out to the Kansas City area to go to a clinic. The medicine was administered, I believe, over the time of 30 to 60 minutes it's in an IV drip. So it's a slow titration. They're monitoring my blood pressure. I'm kind of hooked up to machines. So it's kind of a very clinical setting. So I tried the best to make myself comfortable and I had blinders, eye masks on, blankets, trying to create a comfy at-home kind of situation outside of just a clinical setting. And so the experience itself lasted about 60 to 90 minutes. I do remember in that first initial few 10 to 20 minutes of the experience, it was just body euphoria, feeling good in my body. Ketamine is technically, it's almost like an anesthetic. It's psychedelic adjacent, so it's a dissociative. But I remember just feelings of elation and feeling good, and the music I was listening to started taking more dimensions. It was kind of like listening in 4D almost. I could feel larger space, but it was just all within myself. And at some point, the music kind of just phased out into a digital haze, and I had a breathing protocol, so box breathing. You take inhale for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. I was very conscious of my breath and using that as an anchor for myself so that I could really be in the experience and feel safe. So at some point, my body was just breathing on its own. I felt comfortable to just kind of go into experience at that point. I felt safe. I felt contained. I felt supported. And then at some point, my breath just came down to a single point, and then I just blipped out and nothing.
Yeah.
And then later I came to of feelings of warmth, feelings of being held, feelings of healing. It felt like the weight of depression was lifted, like the heavy cloak I was wearing.
Yeah.
It's like the hooks were out, and I felt lighter. It felt like I forgot what it was like to be sad.
Right.
I felt happy for the first time in a long time. And so after that first experience, I tell folks it felt like dying, but in the most warm and comforting way, not scary at all. It was like going back to, I relate it now, it felt like going back to the big pond that I came from.
Sure.
So whatever sources, whatever higher power kind of put me in this little vessel that I'm currently occupying, it felt like I went back to that home. And so got rid of that fear of death and that fear of the unknown.
Right.
I felt that if this is where I'm going when I'm gone, then that's a wonderful, comforting thing. And so that made me also be more comfortable with my sister's situation of, despite her situation and where she is now, if she's gone to us, I know I'll meet her again in that big pool in the end.
Yeah.
So massive comfort, massive of the situation that I was in is heartbreaking, and it was so hard to deal with at the time. But because I engaged with these therapies in a very intentional way, in a way that was serving myself and my family, and trying to find solutions and help others, I think I had all the right kind of motivations and the right kind of intentions that helped guide me on my journey, and the things that I could really attach to, these higher ideals of living in life. And
yeah, that's it. It's the higher ideals, right? It's, this medicine has a unique way of lifting the burdens of life off of your shoulders, right? And when you come out of the journey, like, you feel that relief immediately, like, mind, body, spirit. We talk, it is profound, right, in that experience, and coming out of that and feeling it for what it feels like the very first time, or a feeling that you have not felt in almost a lifetime, right? It's incredible, right? And it gives you that hope, right? And that belief that, hey, everything's gonna be okay, because this stuff is not real. We put too much value in the wrong things, right? And I think that's a lot of the part of the American experience, right? Is the consumerism and the things that we have to participate in as a society. But I think we owe it to ourselves, to really start putting into perspective what is really important, right? Is it that college education to go work for the rest of your life into a grave, or is it spending quality time with your children, or with things that you're able to express yourself through art, music, poetry, or create things by building a cabinet or things of that nature, right? Is that the real value? I think we are coming to that point now that we need to start really making these, having these conversations and making these determinations, because if we do more of what we're doing today, like, the mental health of this country is going to, put us further into destabilization, right? And it's already a national security problem right now, in the sense that if we were talking about from a recruitment effort, you've got people that are, out of physical standards of joining. So, that's disqualifying 70% of the population, right? Then you got another, of that remaining pool, you take 15 to 20% of that pool away for mental health, problems. So you're really pooling from maybe 5-10% of the total population, and only 1% of the population are serving in any capacity: military, first responder, law enforcement. So we really got to do a better job of framing to our youth, what is important.
True. Yes. No. Agreed. Yes. What's important for me is family and love, and trying to take the context that I found myself in, and really create a system that's uniquely for myself too. And so, yeah, I take a lot of inspiration for my father's side of the family, of my grandpa, Alvadine. He was a psychiatrist. He served in the Navy. He did a residency at the Menninger's Clinic when that was still in Topeka. He ended up working with the VA in Topeka to help soldiers with PTSD. So this narrative was kind of in my family from the start. Of my grandma Ruth as a nurse, and so they. I remember just going to Lutheran church with them in Topeka, singing, feeling comfort and love and warmth, and then seeing the work that they did to help people, heal people. They're a big inspiration for me on the clinical side of things, and on my mother's side of the things. My mother has such a sense of belief and a sense of spirit. She believes that things can happen if you believe and you pray. Pray to something, pray to anything, and things will happen for you. And so I kind of take both sides of my mother's and my father's side of how I was raised and what I saw growing up and what those values were, and I kind of find myself in the middle. Again, kind of taking the clinical side of things and the holistic side of things, and finding a nice middle ground that's balanced. And so I take a lot of inspiration from the examples in my life of family and love, and how can I create that support for other people in community and building that up. And so, yes, I agree. There seems like a shift in priorities of what is living a good life. What does that look like? What is a healthy balance, work-life balance? Where should we be putting our energies and our focus on to really make the biggest impact that we can for ourselves and others? So yes, no, agreed. There's a larger shift in priorities and what people really care about, which I'm happy to see.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to admit it. Like my priorities were all messed up until I got onto the medical journey myself, right? And I was putting all of my beliefs into the wrong basket and chasing the wrong things that, really, I look back and I'm like, man, like how was I that foolish, right? As an individual to be, chasing some of these things. But, I think that's part of the experience, right? Of the human experience is, going through this passage of things and growing, and truly coming to understanding what is important and what is not important. So, ketamine is becoming a larger tool for individuals as a resource, right? It's legal now across the United States. Texas has a lot of facilities now that are doing this, and common practice is generally 6 sessions of sitting through an experience, 90 minutes at length, and you're in a clinical setting. What can we take from the learnings of the ketamine experience that is now happening? What do we take from that and start dropping it into the psilocybin conversations that you seem to be, the next thing here that is going to break free, right? Because we know the FDA has come through 2 separate breakthrough researching saying that psilocybin is a incredible modality of treatment of mental health, treatment-resistant disorders. They've signaled as much that they're going to deschedule, right, through the FDA and more specifically the ATF, or DEA that controls that really. These are all positive things. What are you gearing your organization towards as potential legalities starts rolling through the states?
True. Yes. No. So yes, we're looking to the future of the gears that are turning. They're turning slowly, but they're turning nonetheless. I firmly believe that this is going to be a large part of the future of mental health care in our country. I feel like the wave is crested, and we're kind of riding that top of the wave of the movements already underway. We have all these clinical trials and all these studies that have already come out in the last few years that have kind of validated what people thought initially in the 60s and the 70s when they were first doing this research and trying to figure out the best ways to approach these medicines, because they saw the impacts that these had on communities, folks that use things in more of a ceremonial ritual kind of sense. So yes, thinking about things like psilocybin, ayahuasca, things that are used peyote, things that are used more in like an indigenous setting, trying to take the lessons of how they view community and how they view healing, and kind of trying to apply those more to our Western kind of mindset of there's a nice middle ground, I think, of where we can support people and build community where there wasn't community before, and have relationships built on just humans having a human experience. So through the Lawrence Psychedelic Society, I've met folks that I'm now close friends with, and they've met folks that they are now close friends with, and they started their own projects. So we have folks starting to work on a podcast of where we're trying to connect with our local community members, highlight the things that they've gone through in their own journey, really humanizing the experience so that people can relate to other individuals' experiences. It kind of creates that sense of empathy of if you can walk in someone else's shoes and you can kind of find the experiences that you share in life, because we all share certain experiences of loss and death, and how do we deal with these things as people? How can we relate to people as people and help guide each other along these journeys? So I'm kind of at the space now where my main healing journey took place 3 years ago when I was going through all that, the crisis, how I tried to make sense of things. And I found myself on the other side of it, of having gone through the whole system for myself with preparation and integration and the right kind of support, the right integration afterwards, where I was writing poetry again for the first time since getting sober, of these creative things are now just flowing through me. And how can I capitalize on that? How can I take the poems that pop into my head and the songs that pop into my head, how can I translate those into physical hard things? And so I can see taking the interior to the exterior, helping folks really find out what's important to them. How can we create a sense of value in themselves? And then how can we take their values and then for them create this opportunity of, okay, you've gone through this healing journey. You have what's important to you. How can we enable you, like I was enabled a few years ago, of what matters to me is family and love, dealing with hard mental health conditions like schizophrenia and bipolar. How can I best represent the things that I value? And so that's a big part of my work as the founder and the current steward of this organization, of how can I best support folks getting on their journey, helping them figure out what they care about and what they value, and then how can we turn that into real actionable causes, and how can we make real change locally? And it makes me so happy to see that folks have taken up the mantle. We have a couple veterans in our group that are now doing veteran outreach. They're going to VAs. They're talking to VAs out in Topeka and Lawrence, starting conversations, getting things going in regards to just planting that seed in someone's brain of how can we support people now. We have folks, a couple of EMS workers. They're taking that first responder standpoint. And so that's when we went to the Topeka Capitol a couple months ago for their mental health day. They have a once a year advocacy day where folks from mental health organizations come. We made our first appearance as kind of like a public group. So we had a couple veterans, we had an EMS worker, and then a couple Patriot civilians come in just to talk about their viewpoints and perspectives too. It was kind of convenient because I had it on my docket to reach out and research all these groups that I wanted to meet, but I'm glad that there was this opportunity where they were all there in this one building.
Right.
So it took a lot of the groundwork out for me, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
But yeah, we met groups that are involved with suicide prevention, addiction treatment, finding folks that are kind of displaced because of their mental health issues, and then creating the support that where they can reintegrate to society too. And we had nobody that shooed us away, nobody that would put us down. Everyone was optimistic. Everyone said, "Oh, we've heard about this. We've heard about psilocybin therapy." I shared my own ketamine therapy with a few folks, and then I had some people come to the side of. They said, "I couldn't talk about this in front of the group that I worked with, but thank you for talking about ketamine therapy," because she went through her own ketamine therapy. Just having that interaction with someone makes all this worthwhile for me. I can connect with someone on a deep empathic level that I have not met before. We can talk about raw things like our feelings and our emotions and have a very human discussion of what that means for people to work through.
Being vulnerable, having real conversation.
True.
Trying to get to a common result of, how do we make things better?
Truly. So I was energized from that. We talked to a couple senators and a couple reps. They were a little more sober-minded of here's the challenges in Kansas. And that's kind of where we understood of we don't have to try to push things through in the legislative space, because we can do so much more on the outskirts of. I tell folks, psychedelics we're just a degree of a whole circle.
Yeah.
So there's 359 other parts of existence in life, and the foundation, the ecosystem that can kind of be set up to help this. So we're working on that other rest of the circle of how can we provide that support? How can we build a network of support? And do things in the a most sensible way. So we talked to a couple reps. Barbara Ballard was. She's our rep in Lawrence. We mentioned an art therapy program that one of our veterans put forward. He saw the need for that creative, expressive, and part of integration of things that are not just talk therapy with a therapist, things that are outside of just sharing information through words, but there's more expressive ways to kind of deal with these things. And so her ears kind of perked up because she was a music major in college, and she was also working on some psychology, and one of her advisors said, "Oh, you can turn this into music therapy." So she understood the value of this more creative expression side of things. And so she explained some of pilot programs and kind of how they do things from an organizational standpoint. So that got our brains turning of, we can partner with a local mental health org like Burton Ash or Vallejo. Mm-hmm. We can say, here, we have a group of veterans that we want to support on their healing journey. We're not asking for a lot. We were asking for the resources to maybe set up a center where we can have people come and congregate, build a community in a physical location. And then we can provide them music therapy, art therapy, poetry, writing therapy. Of they're working through their things in their own space. We don't have to worry about providing the medicine. We don't have to worry about changing things legislatively. We can provide ongoing support right now through low cost, low risk, high reward kind of things like art therapy and music therapy. Really ways that people can engage with themselves and express themselves.
Right. And, What I've really come to learn about these therapies, right? It's, you know, it's not just art therapy. It's not just equine therapy, right? It's, if you boil it all down, it's this idea of, having a singular focus on something that you're able just to push everything out of stress, of confluence, of things that are just in your orbit. You can push that all to the side and you focus on one thing, right? When you focus on one thing, clarity, all this comes to fruition. That's the real power of these things. Again, like these, the power of the medicine opens the door for you to explore other things.
Yes, agreed. So I relate to folks of the medicine. In my opinion, it's kind of like a pattern disruption.
Yeah.
So you can think of addiction as a pattern. You can think of depression as a pattern. These things that are very hard to get out of, these very difficult to treat, again, treatment-resistant conditions of the traditional mental health structures have not been able to kind of stop the pattern. And so the ketamine therapy, for me, that was a pattern disruption of it's like the computer's not working. So what do? You don't know what to do with it. You turn it off and on, and all of a sudden it's kind of working again. Right. It felt like all these disparate parts of me, my left and right hemispheres, my sense of reason, my sense of creativity, they were kind of disjointed, and it's like my whole system wasn't communicating with my own self.
Yeah.
So after those ketamine therapies, it felt like a recombination and a hardening again of who I was and what I can be, and due to the intentions that I was setting, I help credit of it's kind of like an alchemical process.
Yeah.
You can think of like those old esoteric occult practices of alchemy, and I think it's taking those base metals, those lower ideals, those first intentions that you're kind of working with, moving them through the body, through somatic work, through body work, breath work, yoga, exercise. The body is essentially the cauldron or the oven that you're putting all these things into, your thoughts, your feelings, working it through the body. And then through that work, you have an alchemization of thoughts and feelings into higher ideals and higher perspectives. So that's kind of how I understood the metaphor and the narrative of these things that people have been working on for hundreds, thousands of years. They had a greater understanding of these things. They use things in the context of creativity and metaphor and meaning making because they had experiences themselves. They had to make sense of it in the context and the time period that they're in.
Yeah.
I tell folks all those esoteric occult guys were kind of just like big creative nerds of like, they create this whole system that they can make sense of. It's through art and writing and poetry and music based on the time that they're living in. And so based on the time that I'm living in too, I take these things very seriously of the written word is very powerful. You can take a thought and a feeling from inside yourself, articulate it by speaking it out, expressing it, putting it out into the world of these vibrations that we're causing with our bodies. And then you can write things down in a physical thing. So this is a tone for me. This is a magic spell book. I write my intentions in it. So my intention for today was communicate.
Yeah.
How can I best communicate? How can I take my interior self, make it exterior? How can I connect folks in this space in an intentional way and then help them communicate their interior to their exterior? I've gone through this learning, this alchemy process over the past few years of very intentional, creative, expressive work for integration and human experience. And so how can I help enable other people to go through that experience themselves in the most safe and supported way where they feel safe to go off into this dark wood of mental health and emotional wellness, but feel like they have this string that they can pull on just in case they need help, and we'll be here to help them.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the best ways I've ever heard it put together like that, right? Because it is a transformative process, right? You're coming in as a crude, piece of ore, and then you're being shaped and tarnished and all sorts of other things to get to your end state. It's great. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit on getting your personal thoughts on a couple things, right? The Grunt Style Foundation is involved in a lot of different things, right? We work together on a lot of different psychedelic aspects within the state of Missouri and Kansas. We have mutual friends in Deep and Tempe, and some of the work that's happening there. We're putting a significant focus this year in the use of SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? And we understand there's significant dangers that come with this medicine, as well as significant results of positivity for people that are using this medicine as well, right? but we continue to see study after study that these SSRIs are not delivering on what they are being marketed as, right? We're seeing lawsuits after lawsuit, going after big pharma on these things. You're seeing suicide across the numbers are just gross, right? Largely affecting the first responder and veteran community. That's why we're hoisting up the flag and saying we need to try something different here, right? And this is where this modality, alternative modalities of treatment and psychedelics, is really coming in forward. But some of the data here I want to get your opine on is, there are significantly higher suicidal ideations that come with these SSRIs that are being prescribed. Is there better ways of doing this, especially when it comes to, the sheer number, right, of suicides that we're seeing? And, in the time period, SSRIs did not become popular until 60, 70 years ago. In the same, period of time, call it, a direct result of it or a coincidence. I'm not a doctor, so I can only tell you what I read and what my eyes tell me and what my brain discerns. But in that same period of time, suicides have gone up astronomically, and there's tomes of data that can support that, right? Where are you at? You come from you have a lot of different experiences with the mental health of your own personal self. Where are you at on these SSRIs in our community?
Certainly. So I took SSRIs for a number of years for my depression. Again, it wasn't as effective as engaging with psychedelics. But I credit that because the success I found was because I had that mental health foundation. So certainly if folks are in the gamut of depression or anxiety, it may be helpful for them to engage with SSRIs. Maybe not for the rest of their life, if they can find other things that can kind of help heal more as opposed to treating long term. So I moved through SSRIs. At some point, they were not as effective for me, so I eventually switched to microdosing. So microdosing psilocybin was a big change for me. Of I was able to take this natural substitute and remove a pharmacological thing that was moving through my body, and so I credit that slow shift of doing little bits of work, going to therapy regularly, doing that mental health work day in and day out. That enabled me to kind of make that shift too. So I tell folks too, of psychedelics can help bolster the effectiveness of therapy. So just because you do psychedelics, don't stop your therapy.
Right.
It may just make the therapy that much more effective because you're entering these spaces of neuroplasticity. And that's kind of, again, the pattern disruption. Neuroplasticity is a key feature of a lot of psychedelics, where it creates that opportunity for the self to heal the self.
And create new neural pathways.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So it kind of softens the brain a little bit from this hardened state that kind of, depression, anxiety, addiction, it calcifies the brain almost, to use another metaphor. And the psychedelics kind of loosen that up too. So where it helps create the opportunity for new neural pathways, new ways of learning, ways that kind of were when we were younger. We had more flexibility, more malleability in how we kind of learn. And again, that's the positives and kind of the negatives too of psychedelics. So with my sister's case of that neuroplasticity, kind of it softened her brain and her ability to learn and create new neural pathways, but she wasn't given the opportunity to reharden. For example, another metaphor of like metallurgy and creating shields or swords, of you're melting down these base metals. If you recombine it in the wrong way, you'll have an ineffective weapon or an ineffective shield. And that is just how things can go wrong with the wrong kind of set and circumstances.
Right. Yeah. That's a great metaphor of putting it. Like, it is the forging of steel, right? Once you have created that thing, right, and you've shaped it all the right ways, right, that cooling process to get it hardened up, right, and entry into, use, right, is absolutely important. And then the same goes for your brain as you're going through these processes of healing with the medicine. You certainly, you're just not going to, come off of an ayahuasca experience and, go drive, across the nation, right? Or, get yourself involved in some highly emotional conversations. Probably not going to do that either. There's rails that need to be guided as well. That's the importance of integration. But I appreciate the feedback on the SSRI, right? That is a clear present danger right in front of us now, right? The initiatives that we're working on with the Grunt Style Foundation is, again, we're not saying that everybody should be off SSRIs by any standard. As we do not want to be misunderstood. What we are talking about is putting some barriers around that and saying, hey, informed signatory consent from between you and your doctor, where the doctor is telling you exactly how this medicine is going to interact with this medicine, and there could be potentials of suicidal ideation, and you need to be prepared for that. Those conversations they're not having right now, and we can do a better job of that.
Yes, no, agreed. And similarly too with psychedelics, I tell people take it very, very slow. There's no need to dive into the deep end. You can take things in a very slow and measured way. Find out what works for you, how it interacts with the rest of your body, the rest of your current context. So a lot of folks also talk about the social aspect of things and kind of where you are in your relationships with people. Of sometimes it's not the right time to engage with medicine. You have to take things very slowly. You have to talk to the right kind of folks. You talk to your family and talk to your friends. People talk about set and setting a lot. Set the mindset of where are you emotionally and mentally, and then the setting is the physical location where you're engaging with these things. You have to be very mindful of what you're kind of exposing yourself to, because psychedelics are an amplifier. It takes what's already existing, what you can kind of perceive through sound and sight and all these things, it amplifies it. So it kind of opens you up and makes you more sensitive to input. So you have to be careful with what you input. If you input the wrong thing, or you have sort of a bad mindset, it can just spiral out of control. And that's kind of where people talk about the bad or difficult trips that they can't integrate. Sometimes people need to have those difficult trips to really address their root traumas and really get at them. Get at them in a very intentional and structured way, so that you don't go into crisis. I tell folks, be very slow and measured. Talk to the right kinds of people.
That's extraordinarily important, because what I've heard from time and time again of people going through ayahuasca, right? And I've seen it with my own eyes. Sitting with them, being a facilitator or a helper, right? Is like day one, oh, this isn't for me, right? Day two, I still don't get it. I don't understand it. But day three, they've just met their creator, and they're like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever happened in my life. I'm on a path that will forever change, right? It's every time, right? There are few, you get people that are like on day one, you're like, oh my God, I totally get it. I've clicked in. But, and it's interesting, like, the resistance that, people will have with that medicine, because, you and I know that ego is the driver of all things, right? And, to relinquish control is extraordinarily difficult. It's part of the human experience, right? You have to control everything. Everything has to be in order, right? Whereas, psychedelics, removes your hands from the steering wheel and says, okay, sit back. We're going to show you the last, for me, 46 years of your life.
True. Yes, no. Folks often say that the medicine shows you what you need to know. It also related to some of my other psychedelic experiences of I can go to an experience with a certain kind of intention, a certain kind of mindset, but oftentimes it's something that kind of comes out of left field of something I wasn't addressing, or something that I wasn't quite paying attention to. And the medicine says, no, you need to pay attention to this. So for example, my last medicine work, I had kind of gotten to a place of healing and kind of an understanding and a baseline of my sister's situation. And my sister's situation it's a strange thing to deal with, because there's not really a thing to mourn. We don't know where she is. We don't know if she's alive or dead. So it's kind of like I'm mourning this ghost in between of how do I deal with this thing in an ongoing way. And my last medicine journey, I was doing a lot of shadow work. I was running through thought experiments of, okay, what if she's actually dead? What if I find out something today of here's this answer of where she is and what she is? What do I do with that? And so I went through that thought experiment during my experience, and it was so impactful of and healing because I was able to mourn in a way I had not before.
Yeah.
And the medicine allowed me to enter this experiential realm where I was able to go through these things through my mind and body and spirit. The experience itself is where things happen. And then after the experience is done, you have to integrate it and you have to make sense of it. And so that's been the last few months of I entered a different stage of grief. And the medicine showed me that because I had not addressed it in a while.
Yeah.
It had been a few months that I had really thought about my sister and her situation. And so I wasn't intending to work on that during that experience, but the medicine showed me of here's this thing that you can do to address yourself and your experience. And then integrating that experience later of I can put myself in that mindset again and get back to that place of healing and comfort and acceptance of grief. And so that's moving through different stages of the mental emotional work.
Yeah. You talk about work, right? Describe shadow work for people out there.
Yeah. So shadow work is a psychology term. Comes from Carl Jung, who's been a big inspiration of mine too, of kind of making sense of all this work. So shadow work is addressing your traumas. It's doing the dark side of things. Of a lot of people avoid that. They kind of repress it or put it away in the closet of, I don't want to deal with this right now. And so when you don't deal with it for a while, it kind of starts to fester and boil. And that's where things spill over into a crisis or a larger explosion of here's this thing, and then you're in crisis because of it. So shadow work is kind of, for me, my shadow work was dealing with my sister's situation, dealing with schizophrenia and bipolar in my family, dealing with my own bipolar disorder of how can I not avoid these feelings of grief and sadness? How can I enter them and face them head on? And through that, do that work, do that hard work of shadow work is not fun. No. It is hard work and it is scary and you don't know what's going to happen in the end. But if you can face it with the right kind of mindset and the right kind of support, that's where the healing is by facing something head on.
And crazily enough, right? And you won't believe it until you experience it yourself. Is that the medicine has a way of preparing you for that shadow work, right? It's going to give you the tools before you walk into that difficult space. And I've always found that peculiar, right? In all across all the different plants, right? Each plant speaks to you a different way. It opens up different, psilocybin is more emotional, right? Ayahuasca is more, like a thinker, right? Like let's get into that real stuff, right? You're not going to be so as emotional as you are on the psilocybin, and then you go down to ibogaine and all the others, right? But they all have their way of speaking to you in this very unique way of saying, "Hey, welcome to the party. It's not going to be a fun adventure, but along the way you're going to learn a lot of things, sure. And I'm going to give you a lot of things to take with you on this adventure so that it's going to prepare you." And that's been my experience every time, right? Has that been similar to you? It seems that a lot of people I talk to, True. He is the same story over and over.
True. Oh yeah, no, certainly. And that's something I've heard anecdotally from a lot of folks I've talked to in the space too. So my work with psilocybin has been, yes, again, emotional. I know in different cultures, they sometimes refer to them as niños or the little ones, or right. Trying to getting back to that space of happiness and feeling emotions and being comfortable with feeling things. I haven't had experiences with ayahuasca just because of the medications I take. So with my bipolar meds, MAOIs, it would be a contraindication if I engage with ayahuasca. So I would have to taper off of my medicine, the medications I currently take for a period of time to like flush my system out. And so, yes, with ayahuasca, there are certain considerations, like dietas. Sometimes folks talk about that, of having a certain plant diet or a certain kind of diet for the self to kind of either purge yourself or work things that have been already in your body of getting to a space of like almost like a physical emotional purity, so that you can be in a certain kind of mindset and a certain kind of body to engage with something like ayahuasca. For myself, ketamine, as even though it's a chemical, it had been one of the most spiritual experiences of my life. Again, I mentioned that feeling of a warm death where it's kind of like going back to the pond. That created a sense of spirit and belief in myself that I didn't have previously. So ketamine has been a teacher for me of going back to source, thinking about what that means in terms of the metaphor and the meaning of it. How can I relate my experience in terms of metaphor and narrative, so that I can show folks the journey of where I started, my intentions to work through my depression and bipolar in a certain actionable way, engaging with ketamine, receiving messages or a meaning from ketamine itself, and then making sense of it in my own way through expression and writing as well. So yeah, when we talk about different teachers, there are different things that they bring to light, and there are different things, different mindsets that you can kind of enable within yourself too. And so you can kind of think of them as like acting in these higher archetypal ways of, that's another Carl Jung type of an archetype. Something that means something that doesn't have a physical representation. Mm-hmm. So you can think of it in terms of like the Greek gods. So you have Hermes, Mercury, the god of communication. If I pray to Hermes or Mercury, I'm praying to communication as a concept of, we don't have this physical representation. We know something like this exists because society in general is like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about with communication. The god of war, conflict, aggression, you know what that means. The goddess of love, you know what those things mean. And again, the context of the time and place that people are in, how can they make sense of things in a way that's easily understandable from other people and that people can empathize with. Again, the human experience, it's all shared. These are all different aspects of the human experience outside of ourselves that we can reconnect with, and then have a greater understanding of ourselves as this larger, almost human organism where we're all connected to this unconscious thing that's out there.
It's, as we get further away from our agrarian roots and into the realms of technology, right? I feel that we are losing the spiritualness of our being, right? And that's very important, right? You don't have to believe in God or the dogmas of religion, right? But there's something spiritual about this experience that we're all sharing together on this hurling mud ball that's going through the cosmos at hundreds of thousands of miles per hour, right? So it's fantastic. Ian, if you could share with everybody out that's listening, how do people get involved with the Lawrence Psychedelic Society, or is there other societies like yours around the country that you can point them to if they're not in Kansas?
Yes, certainly. Okay, so for Kansas itself, we have the Lawrence Psychedelic Society. If you Google us, you should be able to find our link tree. We have a link tree. It's link.tr/EE/Lawrence Psychedelic Society. You should be able to find us on Facebook. We have a Signal group as well. Just different ways that we can connect with folks through social media. That is just local to Kansas. We used to have the Kansas Psychedelic Society, but I don't think they're quite as active. So we're trying to be that beacon of folks in Kansas from our viewpoint in Lawrence. But there are a number of other psychedelic societies across the country. Sometimes there's multiple ones in certain states, like California and Colorado. Those are larger states. They have different groups based on, like Boulder, I think, has their own. Denver has their own. But if you can look up the Global Psychedelic Society. So this is a group that I met the other year at the MAPS conference that they had out in Denver. I was tapped into this network. It's kind of funny. I started the Lawrence Psychedelic Society, and then about 2 or 3 months later, I went to the MAPS conference. And some friends that I had met through the psychedelic space online, they had also founded a psychedelic society in Boulder. So they're like, oh, we have this larger kind of umbrella organization called the Global Psychedelic Society. And so I got invited. I was able to join them the day after I had first showed up there. So again, a wonderful thing of synchronicities and coincidences. Right. Here I'm working on this thing, and then I get to be tapped into this larger network. So if you go to the Global Psychedelic Society's website, they have a list of all the societies around the country. Not around the country, but just internationally too. So yeah, there's a lot of groups across the world that are working on these things. There's a network.
That's fantastic. And it's getting bigger every day, right? And the international side of it is very interesting as well, right? There's the enigma that's happening within the United States, right, which is real and exciting. But to see what's the work that's happening in Europe, South America, the bringing of the tribes together, that's currently happening right now. There's a lot of fantastic work that is happening, and I'm very excited, and I'm here for it.
Yes, agreed. Me too.
Right? Ian, I got to say, fantastic conversation today, and I learned a lot, and I hope that you guys did as well. The Lawrence Psychedelic Society is a pivotal part of the conversation that we're having in this country about psychedelics and mental health. You guys have a event coming up in October, Psychedelics conference in Kansas City, correct?
Yes. So again, mentioning Yipin Thampi, he's helping. He's the main driving force of organizing these things here out in the Midwest. So I'm working with him, coordinating our group as well to kind of bring things to the Kansas side of bringing those conversations to light. So last October, they hosted. I believe it was psychedelic. I can't remember the exact name, but there was a Missouri specific conference.
I got called a colonizer at that one.
Sure. Yes. So yeah, we held that in the Missouri side of Kansas City. This year we're kind of doing the same thing, but on the Kansas side now. So yes, looking towards October, we'll be gathering in Kansas City to again have a conference of bringing in clinicians and folks who are working with things on the holistic ceremonial side of things, getting different people's opinions and pieces that can kind of help create this larger puzzle that we're all kind of working towards. So in the next few months in Kansas, we're really focused on creating that network of support for veterans and first responders. We're looking to help provide ketamine treatments. So for example, with the firefighters union, they get 100% coverage. They already have a peer support network in place. Perfect. We can work with that. We can go to a ketamine clinic and say, hey, we have 100% coverage for first responders, folks with the firefighters that are living these traumatic events day after day. How can we help treat them and give them ongoing support so they can keep working to the best of their abilities so that they can heal traumas that are happening as they go? And so we're looking to explore ways that we can create ongoing networks of support now in Kansas. So our big focus in the next few months is creating that network of support. So if there's any folks in Kansas that want to reach out to us and kind of, if they're new to the space, we'll help guide you. We'll help give you the ABCs, the 101 of psychedelics. How can we use these things in an intentional way with the proper preparation and the proper integration afterwards to create real opportunities of healing where people aren't just treating things long-term for the rest of their lives. They're actually healing things, getting better.
That's it. Like nobody wants to be on pills for the rest of their life. Yeah. Nobody wants to be struggling for the rest of their life on these things. And there's a way now. It's right in front of us. So that's fantastic. Yes. Ian, the work that you're doing is fantastic. I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you're doing in the Midwest. The Midwest work across our country. And if you guys are so inclined to get involved yourself, which you should, make sure that you're following the works of Ian Cook and the Great Society there, and start your own. Get involved. Find the society in your area, and if there's not, reach out to this guy. He'll tell you how to start one, right? Because it's that easy, right? All you have to do is take that first step. So we'll continue to have these conversations here on American Grit about mental health and alternative modalities of treatment, and bringing unique individuals that are standing up their own solutions, through experiences of their own that have brought them to this precipice in time where we're saying enough is enough and we need alternative means. So that's our promise to you. And until next time, wash those stinking hands and be kind to one another. And we'll see you soon.